I want to share a particular method of working with our mental projections, which many of you may have noticed can get in the way of our zazen and our lives. And I spoke about this to this group before, but I think it was some years ago, and it bears repetition in any case. It's a version of the five skandhas or aggregates. I wonder how many people have ever looked into the aggregates, the traditional aggregates or skandhas, and how many of you have ever tried to apply it to your lives? How many of you have had great success in that? uh, the traditional version of the skandhas is uh, I had looked into it before learning this particular method from Bernie Glassman. This is a Bernie Glassman design I'm going to share with you. A way he, in some way, simplified the skandhas and brought it more up to speed for our contemporary lives in the world we live in. The traditional form of the skandhas is it reads as a little bit arcane, and it's interesting. There's certain things we might take from it, but it's hard to directly apply it to our lives. And so Bernie Glassman, which there may be some new people who don't know this, he was the first Westerner in the lineage to receive Dharma transmission and become a teacher, and we're all his Dharma descendants in a certain way, except for the original teachers who were also later sanctioned by Maizumi Roshi. But I got to know Bernie well when I was at Naropa Institute in the 1990s, getting my MFA in writing, and he was on the board there at Naropa. And he, a lot of you know Naropa, and it's fundamentally leans very strongly in the Tibetan direction as far as Buddhism goes. So when the Zen people would show up, there wouldn't be much fanfare. In fact, often I all the time would volunteer to pick them up from the airport or take them back. And, when a Tibetan teacher came, there'd be a whole retinue and everybody's got to have white scarves and all that stuff. The Zen teachers never wanted all that. In fact, that's where I met Shishin Roshi for the first time and got to know him was that first summer I was at Naropa. But Bernie, while he was visiting, he'd stay for periods of time. And he had this series of seminars he'd do for people interested in Zen, which at Naropa was about five of us. So he taught these very close, small seminars that I was privileged to be a part of. And the thing that he developed that has been most useful to me and most useful in my teaching was this version of the five skandhas or aggregates. And that's what I want to share with you. I've come to call it the five conditions, partly because I use it with my university students, and aggregates and skandhas sounds like scary language, to them. It sounds arcane and foreign. And in their original form, the skandhas they do read as somewhat arcane. And the way that they viewed the skandhas come from the Abhidharma, which is from the time of the original Buddha, 2,500 years ago. And the way they viewed the psychological aspects of mind are in some ways quite different from the ways we view them today. And Bernie had this idea to see if he could bring them in line with the way we understand psychology. So that's the system I want to share with you. I've come to call it the five conditions because I picked that up from the Heart Sutra when it says, we clearly saw emptiness of all the five conditions. That's the five skandhas or aggregates, right? And five conditions is a friendlier terminology for it and more accessible. And also, in part, this way Bernie developed of working with the skandhas has to do with dealing with our own conditioning. So it fits for that reason as well. So there's the way it's presented or is in a system of five steps or five links to a chain, and that there are five in the original skanda form as well. But it begins with actual reality, what actually happens, that triggers a chain of events that eventually leads to us combining it with our projections and getting them entangled and starting to get our projections tangled with reality and starting to view our projections, our mental formations as reality. And this is something as humans we all do. We get actual reality as close as we get to it. And what we create in our minds, we get them confused all the time. So this is a system that is very helpful for clarifying how this happens and for being able to unwind some of the process. I used to, I've been teaching university students meditation for credit for 20 years now. And I used to bring the system in towards the end of a semester because I thought, it's a little technical. Let's just teach them to meditate. Well, I've first and then, bring in the more philosophical or uh, complex aspects later. But I've actually found it to be so useful that now I introduce it in the second week because it gives them the whole semester to put it into practice. So um, there are just five links in this chain, and I'm going to put them as we talk about them into the chat. I know you may not be able to see the chat that well on the big screen, and you don't all have your individual computers, but I just want to put it in there because you probably won't remember. And if you want to write it down afterwards, there it'll be in the chat. So the first level is, actually, I like to do this as a dialogue when I introduce it to my classes. So I will ask you all, what constitutes our direct experience of reality as close as we can get? One can quibble with whether we ever directly experience reality, but as close as we get, how do we actually know this moment's happening? Anybody want to say? It's not philosophical, it's actual.
Sensory inputs.
Sensory input, that's right. So the first link in this chain of the five conditions is sensation perception. I've just put that um, into the chat. Yeah, we know things are happening because they come in through our senses. So and sensation and perception are they happen together. One doesn't happen without the other, at least in our human experience. So yeah, the first level is called sensation perception. The second level, I wish I could find a different terminology for this, but it's called feeling. And that's the term Bernie continued to use from the original version of the skandhas. There's different translations, of course, because it's translated. So one common translation is feeling, but this doesn't mean feeling like complex emotion. This means um, like or dislike or neutrality. And in the view of the traditional Buddhist psychology, everything that comes in through our sense doors has a subtle effect on us internally. We tend, sometimes it's not so subtle. If we like or dislike something, we know that and it's not necessarily subtle, but it's there's also neutral feeling states. So the closest I can explain that to is it's kind of the way it feels to be Todd right now, right? The way it feels to be yourself right now. There's kind of a subtle wash of mood that's always changing, isn't it? It's on a different day, it feels a little bit different to be Tetsudo than you know, yesterday might feel a little different than today, and it'll feel different throughout the day. And in the Abhidharma system of Buddhist psychology, specifically as applied to the skandhas, it says that what comes in through our sense doors is always influencing that subtly. But for our purposes, the important ones are like or dislike. I put in the chat feeling and then I put plus minus equals. So it means like, dislike, or, neutral. And so, for instance, I might as well start to use a specific example. Supposing you are at work, or perhaps you're at the Sangha on Saturday, and you have someone there who who you generally have a pleasant relationship with, and you walk past them in a hallway, and they give you a weird look. How many people has that ever happened to? Everyone, right? Okay. So so all that's actually happened is somebody gave you this look, right? And what tends to happen when people give us a weird look? Do we like it or dislike it?
Dislike.
We don't usually like it. Yeah, we don't usually like it. Um, the third level is in this chain is reaction, and reaction is um, includes complex emotion. So when somebody gives us a funny look and we don't like it, probably our physical reaction, if they're walking past us, might be, look over our shoulder at them with a look on our own face, right? Quizzical look on our own face or something, but we'll be feeling something also, right? That's beyond just not liking it. And this is prior to thought. Thought's coming up, but it's not there yet. But there'll be a visceral um, emotional response, probably mild, but we might feel a little offended or something, right? Does that make sense? That's what we're talking about when we talk about reaction. Yeah, we probably look over our shoulder, look at their retreating backside with a funny look of our own, and we might feel a little offended or a little thrown off or a little confused. All of those things come under reaction, right? Then the next step in the chain is recognition slash interpretation. And I think I don't have a record of what Bernie's original names for each step were. I think the first three were identical to his. This fourth one's a little bit tricky because um, it could be translated different ways. So I've come to call it recognition slash interpretation. And I've tweaked this model a little bit myself because I've been using it now for 20 years with my students. This is the moment where the mind registers, right? So the way these things happen is somebody can give you a funny look. We can not like it. We can turn over our shoulders to look at them, feel a little bit offended or a little thrown off, a little confused. But all that happens before the mind catches up, right? That's all happens boom, 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 like that. And then the mind catches up, and what do you suppose the first thing is? Another way to think of recognition and interpretation is it might be like the first thought we have before our thoughts get complex. What does one tend to think What would be the first thought that came to mind if you went through that sequence? Anybody?
Curiosity? Just
Well,
being,
that curiosity is the feeling state. So what's the first thing that comes into your mind?
what kind of story?
The story is the fifth level. So this is the mind just registering what happened.
Judgment.
This
Hey,
one's a little tricky.
hey,
What's that? Excuse me?
hey, hey.
It'll be something as simple as that. Yeah. It'll be like, hey, or what's her problem? Right? Or what's with her? Something like that, right? So if I use a different example, for instance, you accidentally touch a hot stove. What's the actual thing that happens if you touch a hot stove?
Ouch.
Well, ouch is later. Ouch is what we're talking about. Yeah, ouch is the fourth level. What actually happens if you go through the chain? What's the only thing that actually in reality happened? Yeah, Lisa, echo.
Oh, I wasn't raising my hand. I was just saying like your hand moves away.
Oh, well, that's the reaction. But how do
Okay.
we know we touched a hot stove? What's the first thing? What's the actual moment of reality that starts the whole thing?
Nervous system sends a signal to the brain.
And
Pain.
yeah, pain or heat, right? That we've experienced heat or pain, probably both, right? Uh, so, do we like that?
No.
No, we don't tend to like it. And as Lisa said, she was gesturing, pulling the hand away. So you're going to touch the hot stove, feel the heat or pain, not like it, and jerk your hand away, all before your mind catches up with it, right? That's all almost reflexive. And then your
Mm.
mind's going to go, ouch, like someone said. I didn't see who said that, but yeah, that's the ouch point, or hot, or damn it, one of those things. That's where the mind realizes what happens, what's actually happened. Does that make sense? Yeah. The next level, somebody already said it, is the story. The story is where everything that is marvelous and dangerous about being human comes in. Um, so I like to use this example of a person giving us a funny look because it's something we've all experienced, and I bet and we don't like it. We've had a reaction to it. We've thought, "What's her problem or his problem?" Right? Uh, and And then we download the story, everything we know about people who give us funny looks and what that might mean. And so what are common stories that we've all experienced this? So what are common stories that might immediately follow?
What did I do to her?
What did I do to her? Yeah, yeah. What else? What's another option? That might be, we'll have different, depending on our own conditioning, we'll have different takes on it. So there are other common takes. What else would it be?
I'm always screwing something up.
Okay. Okay, there's a good conditioned rut which is this system is so useful for dealing with those kind of things. Yeah, I'm always screwing something up because I'm always screwing something up goes beyond this situation, doesn't it? It's a conditioned pattern that probably applies to a lot of situations.
Yeah, and I deserve it.
I deserve it. Ooh, Chris, you have a deep psychology. Boy, uh-oh. I'm not sure I want to get into that mind. Oh, yeah, right. I mean, I'm teasing, but these are all common reactions we might have. How many people have ever thought that the person, this means the person doesn't like me, or that I've done something like Ando first said, right? How many people have later found out that that wasn't the case at all, that it had nothing to do with you? Yeah. Or how many people found out that actually the reason the person gave you a funny look is they actually really do like you, and but they don't know how to talk to you, or they're intimidated, or you know they feel self-conscious. How many people have ever had that happen, right? Or later found out that basically one way or another, we later found out that first interpretation we had that led to this whole story was false, right? How many people have had that happen, right? Yeah, it happens all the time, doesn't it? It's universal. It's kind of universal. So this let's go to the hot stove and apply it to the hot stove. So supposing you've got an electric stove, you have roommates, or maybe you have kids. How many people here has ever had kids or been a kid? Okay, so we all know maybe parents and kids is a good way to go with this. Supposing we had a rule because we have an electric stove, and you know those burners stay hot for some time after they're turned off. So you've got a house rule that if the burner's hot, somebody's supposed to stick a post-it note on the front of the stove that says hot so you don't accidentally touch the burner, supposing that's a house rule. And and this time it wasn't done, and that's why you touched it and got burned, right? So so let's just trace the chain through. It seems maybe a little laborious. The funny thing is, if we meditated for a while, we all know that mental projections are not the same as reality and that we get them mixed up. But I've seen again and again how tracing things through this chain really clarifies this. And it gives us opportunities, for instance, to catch ourselves as soon as we see the reaction stage. If we get used to working with the system, then we can drop the story before it even starts, if that seems appropriate. Um, so to go back to the stove, we already agreed that what all that actually happened is we felt heat and or pain. We didn't like it. We pulled our hand away, and and we said ouch or hot or something along those lines. Um, so what's a typical story that might download into our minds?
Billy was careless again. He's always careless.
Okay,
As a result.
right. There you go. So we're talking from the parent, yeah, the parent, say teenager thing. So in this imaginary scenario, let me ask you all, is that necessarily an accurate thought that Billy's always careless? It might be. So, just because it's a story, sometimes people think stories are automatically something negative. Sometimes they're useful. Sometimes it's true. But how many people think it entirely possible that it's not a true statement that Billy is always careless? Yeah, right. Billy's probably not always careless, right? Um, Supposing we took it further, what are further things that we've either heard said to us or heard said to others, or we've said it to someone around a situation like that? Uh, what are other stories?
Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah. Well, there are some version of blah, blah, blah.
Some kind of blaming, like you are.
Yeah, you are, they are. Let's use Billy. Let's use Billy, whoever he is. Yeah, Billy is what? Beyond careless. What might you
Self-absorbed,
say? What's that?
self-absorbed, self-absorbed, or selfish.
Self-absorbed. If he's a teenager, he certainly is self-absorbed. Yeah. So that might be true. Um, what else? Let's have a little fun. Come up with some darker ones. We've heard them, I know.
Billy's
Billy's
mean.
trying to go
I
ahead.
was,
I was gonna
sorry, I
say
couldn't.
Billy's mean and meant to do that to me.
Okay, all right. All right, Billy did it on purpose. Okay.
Mhm.
That's quite a dark one. Billy's out to get me. Okay. How about the things we hear a lot like he has no respect. I work night and day for that kid and he just doesn't care. Things like that, right? Um, so that's the kind of thing that can cause a rift, sometimes a permanent rift, especially if these situations are repeated, right? Another example I like to use, which is similar. Well, let's use it because it's pretty similar, and and it'll allow you all to trace through the chain. Supposing you come home one day and you step into your kitchen and a fork covered with peanut butter has been left on the counter and the ants have gotten to it, so it's covered with ants. Okay, can you all help me trace this through the 5 conditions? What actually happened? What's the first thing?
See the spoon?
You just see yeah. You just see, I had called a fork, but it could just as well be a spoon. Yeah, you just see this implement covered with peanut butter and ants, right? Okay. How many people would like seeing that? So it's kind the like and dislike comes so close upon the sensation that we almost don't notice it. But of course, this is the first place at which the self comes into it, right? Because that's a personal reaction. Probably nobody likes ants crawling over peanut butter on the kitchen counter, but unless they're in one of those countries where they eat insects, in which case peanut butter and ants might be lovely, and you might just go, oh, but in general, there are places where people eat ants. Yeah, we're not going to like it, right? So what do you imagine our reaction might be, both physical and emotional?
You might tighten up.
You tighten up and probably recoil, wouldn't you? It's like, wouldn't, I don't know if you can all see me very well, but it's probably you might even take a step back or recoil in some way physically, right? And then what's what more complex emotion might accompany that? That's all part of the reaction.
Disgust.
Disgust would be a common one, wouldn't it? Yeah, disgust. So let's go with disgust. And so all that has happened before the mind catches up. In certain of these cases, the recognition or interpretation, it's like the stepping stone to the story. So in some cases, it's more important than others. In this case, it might be something as simple as yuck, right? Where you really register what it is. But can you imagine that you could see it, not like it, feel disgust and recoil physically all before the mind caught up? Because all that's pretty reflexive, isn't it? Okay, then then somebody's ahead of me on the story. Somebody wrote on the story level, more protein, LOL. Yeah, that's true. Is that Chris? Who's MI on? Anyway, somebody wrote in the chat, more protein, LOL. That's one story that could arise if you were in one of those countries where they like to eat ants. But what is more likely, this kind of story? It's going to be along the lines of the one we just went with, right? What are some other versions of it?
Now I'm going to have to hire an exterminator.
Now oh yeah, there's a good one. I'm gonna have to hire an exterminator. Okay, yeah. What else? Give me a few more. Have a little fun with it. It's nice to have fun with it because we make fun of ourselves, what our minds do. Go ahead, sorry. Someone started.
Blame.
Sorry?
Blame. You try to figure out
Blame,
who
yeah,
did.
it'll be some version of blame. So let's hear the blame.
Why am I so stupid? Leaving stuff out like this. I know there's
if you
ants
did.
around, you know.
If you're the one who did it, sure. Yeah, if you're the one who did it, yeah, self-blame. Yeah, why am I so stupid? That sort of stuff. If
I've
Billy
told
did it,
I've told my mom 100 times to put her food away when she's done.
okay, Chris, you're flipping the tables. That's good. Maybe the mom did it and you're the one who has to clean it up, right? So, but the point is, let's, also, it might have been a husband or wife who did this, right? And I actually used this as an example in a seminar once. And somebody raised their hand and said, my husband just did this last week. Did exactly that. So, yeah, so what starts to happen is supposing we go to that kid has no respect, which is a common thing I've heard. Then uh, what happens is we take that as though it were truth, and it probably isn't true that Billy has no respect. You know, um, Billy's careless, maybe he is. Billy's self-absorbed, maybe he is. But let's take one of the darker ones. Like he has no respect, and he doesn't care about everything that all the sacrifices I've made for him. And there's starving children in China, and I work my hands to the bone night and day, and that kid doesn't care. Yeah. So what happens is the story starts to re-stimulate the chain, right? So you're telling yourself a story, and particularly it tends to feed into the reaction. So if you start telling yourself that story, at first you were only disgusted. What emotion's going to be added now?
Anger.
Right. Yeah, you've added anger to the story, to the mix, just simply through your own story, right? Which probably isn't accurate, right? So marriages break up over these sorts of things. So let's so help me through another example here. Supposing we're at the Zen Center and it's a potluck or it's a celebration of some sort. Let's say it's a celebration of some sort, and in this case, everybody didn't bring food. The residents and Roshis and people bought some food for the Sangha at large, and it's all out on the table, and it's at a buffet style, and there's a lovely bowl of grapes, and you pick one up and pop it into your mouth, and when you bite down on it, you realize it's moldy. It's a bad grape, right? Uh, if you trace it through the chain, how would it go? Anybody?
Spit it out.
But which level is that? You would spit it out, but that's not the first thing that happens. What level is that?
Oh,
You taste it.
Yeah, that's the taste. Yeah, you taste the bad taste in the grape, right? But I do want someone to answer the level of because you are going to spit it out. What level is that?
That's reaction
That
level.
that's your reaction, right?
Then you come from, like, God, don't these people take care of what they put on the table? Oh, it's awful, and on and
That's
on.
right. That's exactly. That's where you run to. But yeah, basically you put the grape in your mouth, you bite down on it, realize something's wrong. You don't like that, do you? And you spit it out. Now, I can tell you after 38 years of practice, that's where it would stop for me. This is one great triumph I have gained through my practice. If I eat a bad grape, no one's to blame. I'm not going to waste time thinking about it. I'm just going to spit it out. So you see, we do change through our practice. But actually, you probably run to the recognition phase, like, oh, it's moldy, it's bad, right? But all the trouble happens in the story, right? So let's have a little fun with the story. Um, what somebody already said, well, Sage already said a pretty good one. These people don't take care of these things shouldn't happen, whatever. They should have inspected every grape before. I don't know. What else though? If you really amp it up a little bit.
who brought these grapes?
Yeah, who's to blame is one big category of story. That's always going to happen, right? That's a very common category of stories. Who brought those grapes? And once you realize that it was Sheesh and Roshi and that he's in charge, that he's in charge of it. If your mind keeps running down that track, where would you go with it next?
Just happens.
Well, no, you see, that's an enlightened response. These things happen, you let it go. But supposing you're a more aggressive type than that,
Well, then you'd say, geez, he wasn't very careful about what he picked out for grapes. I'm not eating these grapes here at the Zen Center. In fact, I'm not going to eat anything here anymore. If I come here,
Yeah.
I'm going to bring my own food, which would make everybody happy.
Right, right. Or I thought this place was about mindfulness. This is all bogus, and I'm out of here, you know. Or or I don't know. Can anybody take it a step further? You've assigned blame to Shish and Roshi. What if you're kind of an aggressive type?
Or did he put it there on
Where would you
purpose?
take it even further? What's that?
This isn't aggressive, but maybe he put it there on purpose so I would notice this.
Okay. There you go. He put it there as a, there you go. That's the kind of, this is the kind of complex rationalization we sometimes do about our teachers, right? If he put a moldy grape there on purpose for me to get, he was testing me. Therefore, it was an enlightened act because everything he does is enlightened. Okay. So it must be, he must have done it purposely because an enlightened person does everything with purpose, right? Yeah, we could bring in all these preconceptions about it. How about if we wanted to take the blame further? Not only is he to blame, but he deserves to pay for it in some way. What would you do? Sorry, Roshi. You're a fun example to use, but because you're an authority figure, if you really want to go after authority figures, what's the next level you could do?
I'm gonna sue Roshi.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, yeah. You're gonna sue. Yeah, you're gonna sue him, or you're gonna report him to the American Board of Dietary Roshi Oversight, you know, or something like that. So it never happens again, right? So what tends to happen is is that our common reactions tend to fall into one of two camps. One is the kind of aggression camp, but supposing you're a fear-based, well, have more of a fear-based response as your natural response. And I want to be careful. We're not judging people's responses because whichever typology we have, and there are other typologies as well, but those are two really common ones that we respond to the situation aggressively. Supposing we had the typology where we tended to respond fearfully, what might be our story?
Is this going to make me sick?
Right. Yeah, is this going to make me sick? What kind of mold was it? I've heard that black mold can cause cancer. It's probably black mold. I've got to get to the hospital right now. Right. It can be some version along those lines. I mean, we're exaggerating for fun, but and probably, oh, it just occurred to me, if you're the angry type, then we've just created the grapes of wrath. But anyway, it's we're having fun and we're exaggerating the situation, and you know, a grape might not cause us to actually go to those kind of lengths, but there are situations where this becomes really deep. In fact, we have two conflicting stories going head to head in our country right now, don't we? You know, and people on both sides have them confused with reality, don't they? So they think it's because they think it must be right, you know? And you know, my motto in the Sage Institute training I do for people who are some of you have been through the meditation leader training program that I do for experienced meditation practitioners who want to be able to give basic meditation instruction to others and learn how to do that more effectively. Uh, where was I going with that? Well, this is a central part of that training. We go through this a lot. But what comes up a lot is these deeper and wider social, political, interpersonal issues that can come up. And somebody in that program once, when we were discussing this, brought up the question of a bitter person, somebody who's bitter. How many people know a bitter person? Nobody. Only a few of you. I bet if you think about it, you've all met a bitter person somewhere. Somebody who's bitter, embittered. Um, so we were using this as an example, and somebody in the class said, I know a person who's so bitter that when she raises the shade in the morning and she sees it's a beautiful day outside, she says, literally, a beautiful day is an insult to me. That's how bitter the person is. um, so, um, so if we trace something like that through the chain, what actually happened? What's the actual event?
Seeing sunshine.
She just saw the sun. She just saw the sunshine out through the window. That's all that actually happened, right? Her, a bitter person has some sort of a story, which we'll get to in a minute. But the point here is that the story has actually reconditioned one's natural response to seeing a beautiful day, right? Our natural response is we look out the window, we see a beautiful day, and we like it. But she sees a beautiful day and she immediately doesn't like it. Nobody's born not liking a beautiful day, I don't think. So something has happened in this person's mind that's gone back and even reconditioned her first feeling response, right? So this is how deep this stuff can get. Um, so, uh, so she doesn't like it. Let's imagine her reaction, both physical and emotional. What would she do, maybe?
Close the blinds.
Close the blind, turn away, and what might her emotional reaction be? This is before the story is activated consciously. It's not even activated consciously yet. She sees it, she doesn't like it, she slams the blind down. And what's the emotional feeling?
Probably a pervasive life isn't fair kind of feeling.
Well, that's a story already. See, so that's what's interesting here is
Insult.
yeah, she takes offense. Let's put it that way. She feels offended. Yeah, yeah. So you see, another thing is we often tend to have our emotions mixed up with our thoughts, and they're actually not the same thing. But yeah, it's very common. So sorry to pick on you, Ando. I think that was you that said it, but there.
Yeah.
Uh, I forget what was it you said? Um,
Just the feeling of life isn't fair, but I
right,
was
right,
thinking
right.
besides
That's
feeling
so.
that.
Yeah, right. So a feeling of life isn't fair is a story, right? It's a thought. It's not the same as the feeling. We'd have to go to. Does everyone see that? You see what I'm pointing to? It can, and the reason this can be useful is we don't necessarily, if we start applying attention to how this chain works, then the next time we see the peanut butter and the fork on our counter, it doesn't have to lead to a divorce, maybe. We can have our feeling, we can, and we can recoil, but we either clean up the fork or we decide that we'll talk to our husband. It's got to be the husband, right? So we'll talk to our husband later. Spouses aren't going to, wives aren't going likely to leave the kitchen in that kind of mess. It's going to be the husband. But you can make the choice when you catch yourself reacting and you know where the story could go because you meditate. Uh, you can catch yourself and not just rush off and hurl this whole story at him that he doesn't care for you and he doesn't love you anymore and this and he doesn't care about our house or our lives together and et cetera, and all this stuff. We can just catch ourselves and say, okay, maybe I'll talk to him about it and ask him to be more careful later when when I don't feel so worked up about it. But uh, the point where this comes to our practice, in our practice, is if we start noticing that we tend to react in certain ways, and this leads to certain kinds of thoughts which tend to intensify the reaction. Then once the reaction's intensified, then once, for instance, you become angry on top of disgusted, then the story is going to get bigger and darker and worse, and that's going to make the reaction worse. And it it becomes a cycle of story and emotion that gets trapped and keeps running. Is that familiar? Is that not familiar to anyone? If you've never experienced, please raise your hand. If you've never experienced this. I got to tell you, I was trying to explain meditation to my brother who doesn't understand it at all. And I was trying to just give him the real basic thing. And I said, well, do you ever notice your mind doing things you'd rather not have it do, thinking about things you'd rather not think about, that lead to emotions that really you'd rather not have? And that you wouldn't choose to have. And those emotions may even drive you to actions that you'd rather not do. And he said, no, that never happens to me. I thought, oh, well, he's no candidate for meditation, is he? So one of the things that, one of the categories that I would put this practice under is a mindfulness of mind practice, or mindfulness of mind and heart practice. It's to be able to what are we cultivating on our meditation cushion? We're cultivating the ability to stay present with reality. That's level one, right? Now, we may have our plus minus feelings and there may be reactions, and we sit with that stuff too. But we're letting go of thoughts, essentially, right? Or when we find ourselves caught up in thought, we're returning to our practice. So this power that we start to, there's a hidden power we start to develop, which is the more we are able to work with our thoughts and turn our attention elsewhere or let them go, the more it should become apparent to us that our thoughts are not me, right? And also that our thoughts are sometimes very useful. Don't get me wrong. They're, just because it's a story, there are many positive stories. I'm a storyteller by trade, in part, as an author. So I tell stories all the time. Stories can be positive or they can be negative. They tend to get negative. Well, the dangerous stories are the ones that are unexamined. So we may be running that story about the person having no respect and not caring about us, and we work our fingers to the bone, and nobody even notices it, or whatever the bitter person's telling herself. We'd imagine the story, tends to be with a bitter person something like, life's passed me by, it's too late for me, nothing good ever happens to me. Um, uh, the point is, what that bitter person doesn't realize is that those stories are creating her dark reality. And if she meditated, which she never will probably, and worked with the story consistently, uh, letting go of those thoughts, not only on the meditation cushion, but in daily life, eventually that story would have less hold on her. Eventually, she might stop believing it at all. The reason that I wanted to bring this up today specifically, I actually had two wildly divergent ideas of what I wanted to do for the talk today. And then I talked to somebody in Doksan who brought up this issue that I used to suffer from a lot, which is I used to suffer from very poor self-image and self-regard, and which played out in a lot of negative self-talk. I had a lot of inner messages about myself that were negative. And there was a point in my practice where I really took it on. I was in my mid-30s at the time, and I remember it very well. Suddenly recognizing that, wait a minute, I've been practicing for 5 years now with Zen training, which is pretty serious, and I know how to let go of thoughts. Why don't I do something about these? I started working with it very concertedly, and being willing to see the thought and I almost don't want to say let it go, because what you're doing is you're seeing the thought, which is a model or representation of reality, and instead turning attention to reality itself through the senses, to our direct experience. It took me about 18 months, but I was eventually able to train myself out of those voices. Now, by looking specifically at the thoughts and doing just what we do on the cushion. So I had a whole set of stories about myself. I knew they weren't true intellectually by that age, but that didn't mean they didn't keep playing, right? And remarkably, the practice really worked. It took about 18 months of real concerted effort, but that's it just it's not a problem anymore. It hasn't been a problem for decades, you know? So it hasn't been a problem for 30 years, but it used to be a big part of my life. You know, I thought there was something really wrong with me and I was really deficient. And it was nothing but a set of thoughts. Of course, if you let go of that story, it's uncomfortable to do so because we think it's part of us. And part of the deal with the original version of the skandhas, and Bernie emphasized this too, is actually none of it's me. It all happens by itself. None of this is the true Tetsudo. Uh, this this is all the reaction chain. You know, whether we respond aggressively or fearfully or in some other way, that's in our genes, you know? And they were, you know, and they probably reinforced by, it's like some breeds of dogs are more aggressive, aren't they? I'm sure similar tendencies come in right at the genetic level. And then, of course, they're reinforced or not reinforced through our upbringing. But this this system I found to be so useful with my college students and even with experienced practitioners, because it kind of crystallizes something for us that we all know. The emotion we need to stay with, you know, but we all know that our projections aren't necessarily real. But there's when we work towards releasing some set of projections, we can't deal with the whole thing at once. I really advocate, if there's some pattern that you start to notice, that you have started to notice that plays in your mind that's not doing you any good, well, just know it's not you. And I encourage you to really work with it. You have to work with it on the cushion, but you have to work with it all through the day. I had to let go of that negative self-talk pattern of feelings 1,000 times and 1,000 times again. And that was just the first week. But I just kept at it and it really worked. You know, I knew all that stuff wasn't true. It came from peers and teachers. And so I really encourage, like anything in practice, theory is not much good unless you put it into use, unless you put it into actual practice. So we got 5 minutes left. I just want to leave a little time for any questions or comments about this. I hope you find it useful. Bernie just dropped this after Naropa. I think he made it up just mostly for us, and then he moved on. I asked his wife, Eve, once if she'd ever heard him or known him to give a seminar on this, and she said, no, he never talked about it to me or anything. But unbeknownst to Bernie, now he's gone. I picked it up and I've used it very successfully with college students. Sometimes some of them even get it in a semester. They realize, wait, I was all upset yesterday, but nothing really happened. Where's that coming from? And they start to really be able to put two and two together. Oh, it's what I was thinking up here was causing, you know, was getting involved in this reaction chain, and it didn't have to happen, you know? So, yeah, anyone got questions, comments, objections, or complaints?
Yeah. Let me say something, Tetsudo. Thank you.
Sure.
Talk, but in our last board of directors meeting, we were talking about liability insurance for the directors and the board. And your example of the grape convinced me we definitely.
Roche is really worried about them grapes. Okay, yeah, you're right. We better get that liability.
There's a famous story that you probably know is in one of Aiken Roche's books. It's called Eating the Blame. And
Yes.
the Tenzo was told by the abbot in a monastery that they were having these important visitors and he needs to prepare this great meal for them, and they're coming in an hour. So he rushed out to the garden and started harvesting things. He had a little scythe that he was cutting some grain, and unbeknownst to him, there's a snake in the in the sheaths, and he cut off the head of the snake, threw it in the pot, and made the meal and served it to everybody, and they were all saying how delicious it is. And then the abbot said to call the Tenzo over, and they brought the Tenzo in, and the abbot won the lottery. And he pointed at his bowl and he said, "What's that?" And the Tenzo said, "Oh, thank you." And he grabbed the snake's head and stuck it in his mouth and ate it.
Yeah. Eating the
So,
brain, that's great.
So he gave everybody a teisho on the spot. And I would say that I've eaten moldy grapes before, so if it happens, let me know.
Thank you, Roshi.